Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Just before we get started, a little reminder for everybody to put their mobile phones on mute, just in case. We all forget, don't we, sometimes? So, given the panel today, I thought I would, the task of practicing a little bit of Spanish. So, allow me, I hope my French-Canadian accent will not come out too much. I'll just say a few words in Spanish and then we'll keep it up. And then you can tell me how I did at the end of the panel. So, bienvenidos a la 14ª serie sobre minería de Fasken. Mi nombre es Frank Mariage y soy parte del grupo global de minería de Fasken y también soy socio de la oficina de Fasken en Montreal. All right. Today's webinar, 14th Annual Latin American Mining Update, Why It's So Hard to Crack the Rock, Dispatches from LatAm, is the 10th in our series of 14 seminars this year. A calendar of all Fasken's PDAC events can be found underneath the video window. And for those online, please refer to the slide on your screen for information. Before we begin, I would like to provide a land acknowledgement. At Fasken, we have embarked on a journey of reconciliation, guided by our Reconciliation Action Plan. As part of this journey, we believe it is important to acknowledge the land and the people who have called this land home since immemorial times. Today, in Toronto, where the PDAC conference is being held, we are gathered on territory that has been the home of many nations, including the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Chippewa, and the Mississauga of the Credit First Nations. Toronto is also covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Chippewa. We appreciate living and working here and recognize the importance of working to advance reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people here and across Canada. So let's begin. Now I turn it over to my colleague and partner, Paul Fornazzari, a partner in Fasken's Toronto office and the moderator of today's panel. Paul will introduce the panelists today. Paul?
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Frank, and welcome everybody. We've been doing this for 14 years with our good friends from Latin America, and really enjoyed it. It's always informative. We've gotten into a really good routine where we now do a bit of an update as to what's happening. And if people have been coming here for 14 years, they'll probably hear some of the same recycled questions from years ago, but they are always changing and always relevant. And some countries are going up, others are going down, and we will be talking about those going up and down from a kind of mining perspective. This year, what looks like yet another hard year for mining around the world. We will see how each LatAm jurisdiction is faring, and then take a dive into the long-term problems and risks that mining is facing in each of the jurisdictions in Latin America. And that's why we called it Why It's So Hard to Crack the Rock. I personally see a real disconnect and lack of insight, frankly, from government and some investors into the growing mineral needs of the world, and the lack of social government and investor support for an ever-growing regulatory burden at all stages of the mining cycle. So on the one hand, what I'm saying is everyone realizes how important mining is, and yet on the other hand, it's getting harder on so many levels. So we'll have a question and answer period at the end, and after we'll have a kind of informal gathering here where the panelists can be approached and ask any detailed questions. So let me jump to the panelists, all now very good friends who have been with us in this journey, as my kids always say. From the beginning, from Argentina, Saúl Feilbogen, from Vitale, Manoff, and Feilbogen, good friend, we've known each other forever, a good mining lawyer. From Brazil, Roberta Demange, who's replacing Carlos Vilhena this year. They're from Pinheiro, Neto, Abogados. Roberta is a partner at the firm and practices transactional work in mining and infrastructure sectors. From Chile, good friend Carlos Perez-Cotapos, from his firm Cariola, Diez, Perez-Cotapos, Compañía Ltda, and a very well-known Chilean mining lawyer. From Colombia, Mariana Sanchez, who's here replacing Álvaro José Rodriguez. From Ponce, Herrera and Ruiz, and Mariana focuses on natural resources and infrastructure. Welcome. From Ecuador, María Isabel Aillón de Pérez Bustamante en Ponce. María Isabel is a partner at PPP and practices natural resource law and dispute resolution. Mexico, new attendee, Fernando Todd. He's replacing Jorge Sanchez, and Fernando is a partner at Todd Todd y Asociados, and practices transactional work in the mining sector. And last but not least, from Peru, Oscar Benavides, Rodrigo, Elías, and Medrano Abogados, and one of the top mining lawyers there as well. And you should ask him about the Peruvian delegation if you have a chance. There's a lot going on, as always, in the politics in Peru. And finally, Paul Fornazzari, most of you hopefully know me here by now after 14 years, and I'm an old mining lawyer and securities guy from Toronto. My roots are from Latin America, so that's where I've really done most of my work. So let's start with the current climate for mining. Latin America continues to be a leader in global mining production, and the question for the panelists is generally to comment on the mood and expectations of miners in their respective jurisdictions, especially touching upon these general topics. Is there still as much uncertainty concerning metal demand, production, and costs, and access to financing in your jurisdiction? Is there an increase or decrease in exploration spending generally? And are the majors starting to look at juniors with good exploration opportunities to replace the ongoing depleting reserves in your jurisdiction? And we will kick it off with Saúl from Argentina.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We know that there are a number of events, and you will end up the day very tired, but we hope that you will enjoy our presentation. Thank you, Paul, and the people from Fasken. When we started all this, we were juniors. Not anymore. But the status, the situation of our country changed along the years, and sometimes we met each other and we found that sometimes one country is doing well, the other is not doing that well. It changed a lot. What I have to say about Argentina is that we are on a very interesting and exciting times. One thing is the general economy, the new administration in power, and one other thing is how is the mining market doing? When we talk about mining, we are lucky in Argentina that two of the main minerals that are included in the list of critical minerals are in Argentina. We are lucky that lithium and copper, we have huge reserves. And there are not many opportunities like this. And the country, private companies are trying to take advantage of this situation. Regarding lithium, Argentina has the largest number of projects in the pipeline. There are 3 already in production and 5 more that will start production in the coming 2 years. We believe that Argentina may come up to be the second largest exporter of lithium carbonate in the world after Australia. And this is not expectations. The projects are there. They are spending a lot of money on the construction stage. They are already moving in order to start production. This is based on the north part of Argentina, the provinces of Jujuy, Salta, and Catamarca, that together with Chile and Bolivia form part of the lithium triangle. And Brazil could join not so far, will be a quadrangle, I've heard. This word exists. I've heard that, I've read that. And this is good news because there are not only those projects that are already close to production, but there are many to come. There are a lot of opportunities for those who are looking to invest, to join venture, to finance. There are a number of projects that are in different stages. open to receive new interest. And when we talk about copper, there are no any projects still in production, but there are 5 of them that may increase all the activity in Argentina to a very nice level. They expect that at the end of 2030, we will reach a production of around 500,000 tons of copper. I have to say that those projects are not still in construction, but are in advanced development. So this keeps moving the activity a lot, keeps us busy, and keeps us receiving a number of interest from different countries, investors, companies who want to approach and see their opportunities. This is the general landscape of the mining. I will speak about our new president later on.
Thank you. Carlos, views from Chile?
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for the introduction. I am very happy to be here after 15 years, so thank you for that. Well, as you all know, Chile is the largest producer of copper in the world. We're producing about 7 million tons of copper. In Chile, we have, I would say, all the large mining companies down there. Most of them are the owners of the different mining projects. In terms of exploration, I would say that we have been decreasing the exploration in comparison with the past 10 years. But in the lithium business, in these days, we're receiving a lot of companies looking for lithium, and the state of Chile have decided to develop the lithium property that belongs to the state. Codelco, as you all know, they just signed an agreement with Sokimich in order to develop the Salar de Atacama, which is very interesting because Codelco is the state-owned company that produces only copper. And after this agreement with Sokimich, they are going to produce lithium in a very short time. So this is very interesting that a mining company that produces copper is moving to produce lithium. On the other hand, in relation with the junior mining companies, they are not doing much in Chile, but the few companies that are exploring in Chile, they are coming mainly from Canada and Australia, and they are looking for gold, silver, copper, and lithium. In the way that they are financing, that today is very difficult to get financing for the junior mining companies, they are mainly getting the financing, raising the capital in the stock market, and also they are signing agreement with the large mining companies that are getting involved with the junior mining companies or their assets. That's it.
Great. Oscar, views from Peru?
It's been an interesting year for Peru. Peru is still the #2 producer of copper of the world, and we have all these lovely rankings in metal production that if it were the World Cup soccer rankings, I would be much happier than I am. And there's plenty of room to move ahead. In terms of environment for mining, I was going to say something different, but this morning I heard a presentation in the PDAC Peru Day from a guy that just used to be here, he's just gone, he's not Peruvian, and he said that in his view, Peru was amongst the very, very few countries in the world whose government had actually a specific speech pro-mining. That, and when you think about it, many other countries, many of the countries that are represented here, have a not that clear speech towards mining, and some of them are really going the other way. So that's good, and that's still the case. That has been reflected in this PDAC. We have a big delegation, over 330 Peruvian guys in the delegation with the Prime Minister. Well, he's going to be the Prime Minister until tomorrow because there's been a problem yesterday with him, but with a strong delegation in the country, politics. And we have the room for improving. 2023 began very complicated for Peru last year. Some of you might remember we had some weeks of very, very violent demonstrations, politically and socially driven demonstrations that, complicated the venue of 2023. That ended at the beginning of 2023, and we have had a peaceful year, a year in which some of the mining projects are beginning to get the permitting that they required. One of the big things and the big concerns that we had in the country was we had this red tape that is so big that it's never going to be cut and finished. Well, it's still there, but we are seeing some movement towards from the government in trying to reduce that red tape and actually in trying to reduce the terms in which you get the permitting. There are some very notorious projects in Peru that we are hoping at least one of them could see the light of this year, or at least move forward. And if that happens, I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a renewed trust in what we can do. But the resources are there. Peru continues being a mining country. Mining is the engine of our economy. And that has to be reflected in more projects very soon. Thanks.
Oscar, do you feel comfortable in describing what's going to hit the news today about your prime minister to give everyone a scoop?
No, but now that you ask, unfortunately, yesterday at this very well seen media show, someone aired an audio of the prime minister discussing with a young lady, the relationship and how that could have an impact on her getting a job, right? That's something that happened a few months ago, but someone taped that conversation. That conversation was aired yesterday, and you might imagine what's happening now. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister has been doing, in my view, a pretty good work. He faced very complicated scenarios and days and months. But unfortunately, I think that he's going to have it very difficult to continue in the post. The President has just announced 2 hours ago that he has been summoned to Lima immediately. So tomorrow there was a very big luncheon for the Peruvian delegation. He was going to be the speaker, so hopefully he stays, but we have to manage with that as well. Thanks for the question, Paul.
Thank you for putting me in this position.
Yeah. Peruvian politics are almost as good as U.S. politics. It's just Roberta, comments from Brazil?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you all for having us here. I hope to be in the quadrangle that you mentioned. Yes, that's what we hope, to have Brazil there. I think, in fact, we are all in the same run for critical minerals, but nothing has changed this much in Brazil. I do believe we don't have a very clear speech as we have in Peru, but we do have a government that does not interfere this much with the mining companies, that does not make crazy interventions. We had, as you all know, 2 very big accidents with the tailing dams in the past that calls the attention of the whole media for mining sector in a bad way. But even though we are able to manage to have the same type of interference that we were having in the past few years, new legislation are about to come, deriving from those accidents and all the impacts that it has had in the sector. But we also have very good news in terms of government incentives for mining companies in the landing area. So if any of you were in the Brazilian Day today, they have announced past week a new fund that has been raised by BNDES, that is our development bank, to look for junior companies and to mineral critical areas. This is a very great initiative that we have seen the development bank also investing in venture capital in other areas too, something new for Brazil, and also incentivized from a tax perspective bonds that are also about to be launched within this semester. So I'm an optimist, even if my government is not this clear about the incentives with mining. I do believe we have a great year ahead.
Muchas gracias. María Isabel, de Ecuador.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for having us. It's a great pleasure to be here again. Well, in Ecuador, I would begin saying that the beginning of the year was a little bit dark for the country, and I will refer to those security issues later on. But Ecuador is the hidden gem of the region. I would have to say that we have this big potential, this big geological potential in the country. We are between Colombia and Peru, and we've been on the eye of the big players for several years. However, we haven't seen a very straightforward political decision from our government. But we just made a big change in the presidential office at the end of 2023. If you may recall, President Lasso, the former president of the Republic, dissolved the National Assembly. So he utilized a figure in the Constitution to dissolve the National Assembly and to call out to new elections. So now we have the youngest president of the history. I think he's the youngest in the region. He's an entrepreneur. He's a very well-oriented president. He wants to attract foreign investment. He was actually here speaking at the Ecuador Day today, which is something that we haven't seen before in the country. He's been showing very good signs in the sense of that the country needs mining to survive. On 2023, the mining exports were about $3.3 billion. So it was the biggest amount reported in the whole history. In Ecuador, we only have two large-scale mining projects in production, the Mirador project and the Fruta del Norte project. And those are the numbers with only a couple of large-scale mining projects. So today, the president was really positive in saying that he's going to support mining, he's going to support foreign investment in the country. And we also have good news, as Roberta was saying. I want to be optimistic as well because we've been struggling a lot with environmental consultation and previous indigenous consultation, something not new in the region. However, during these few days of government of President Noboa, we've seen that two medium-scale mining projects have obtained their environmental license, which are great news for the industry. So now we expect those projects to be again on the eye of the big players. And I believe that having this new president with a new vision of how important it is to have private investment supporting the country will open big doors for the national enterprises and for having mining as an important amount in the economy of the country.
Great. Mariana, Colombia, please.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for this invitation. I feel very honored to be with you. Well, I think that the mood of Colombian investors is strongly influenced by the uncertainty generated by the current policies of the current government that does not appear to support and encourage mining in Colombia. While President Petro is engaged with rhetoric about perils and problems of mining, this uncertainty is increasing. That's because this government has begun to pass policies and decrees that does not support mining and does not encourage the fluid of development of mining in Colombia. And these policies are enacted behind the veil of environmental protection. And yes, the industry knows and agrees and accepts that environmental protection is necessary and crucial for the development of mining in Colombia. And in the end, I think that this is a common goal for all Colombians. And even this outlook is complicated. I have to say that there are several reasons to think that there are still opportunities in Colombia to invest in mining. And the first would be that currently the president, one of the some of the policies of the President Petro are the energy transition and also the food security. And I have to say that President Petro has been gentler with transition minerals like copper and nickel than other minerals like thermal coal. And in my view, this is a very important moment for the industry to understand the future of mining in Colombia. It's the moment to know how, when, where mining can be done in Colombia. The second reason is that, as in all of our countries, the geological potential is there. Colombia remains unexplored, so that's a very strong reason to believe in Colombia. And the third one is that even Colombians understand and agrees with this government's concerns about environment. There are increasing people questioning about if this strict policy and this strict approach to mining is warranted given the importance of mining in Colombia. So again, this is a very good moment where all the interested parties in mining can jointly require the government to establish fluent policies to develop mining in Colombia.
Great. Muchas gracias. And lastly, Fernando, views from Mexico.
Thank you. And thanks for the invitation. It's an honor to be here with this panel. Where can I start in the Mexican scene? Just to focus on the question and not go and try not to take the other responses. I think definitely the message from Mexico has not been pro-mining, to call it in the most political way. I can compare mining companies in Mexico, either for investment or local, and you excuse me my comparison, but similar to Rocky Balboa. They keep on putting hits over their face, and he manages to stand up. Every year we have something new from the last, at least from the last administration. We started 5 years ago, and hopefully this is ending this year. We started with no new concessions will be granted, and then we went to no more environmental permits will be granted, and standby for everything mostly. Then we came to a lithium nationalization, and then last year we ended up with a new mining law, and this year we received the cancellation of open pit mining. And I don't know what's happening till October that this president will leave. So definitely it is not a pro-mining message that we're receiving, or the mining companies are receiving. However, Mexico, I'm always an optimistic person, and Mexican geographic position is historically receptionist of foreign investment from the US and from Canada. Formerly a rule of law that we had, and the enforcement of laws that we had, still a noble jurisdiction. And besides all these, just like Rocky, besides all these hits that have been receiving on a constant basis, we're still in the rankings that someone mentioned here. We're still in #1 producer in silver, top 5 in gold, top 5 in copper. The major mining companies in the world are still with major projects in Mexico. For investment, the government just published something last week saying that we have a record high for investment. And so we hear all these contradictory positions, either from the ones that we are day to day with mining companies, advising them and seeing what they're suffering day to day. And on the other side, we're hearing these economic numbers on major players coming. We see on the day-to-day M&A market. We participate, my colleagues and myself, in transactions, not on a daily basis, but constantly within the year. So I think the word to apply to Mexico nowadays, it's uncertainty, and hopefully, I don't know we have elections in June. I will discuss that later on this presentation, but hopefully we see a change or this a reduction of uncertainty to our investors.
Thank you, Fernando. And that's actually a nice segue to our next general topic, which is an analysis of longer-term mining risks and the nuances in Latin America. Just the old fact that 1 in 10,000 mineral projects ever become mines, and that one lucky project from early stage funding for exploration through resource and reserve definition, permitting, mine finance, construction, and production, the time frame has gone up in every jurisdiction, and it keeps going up. The projects I've been with are literally 15 to 20 years and climbing. And this period of, does not match up with commodity or political cycles, as we've heard. So there are several intertwined issues and risks that miners face generally over the life of a project, which I mentioned, and with particularly nuances in Latin America, driven primarily by, I think, decreasing pools of capital for all stages of mining, but primarily at the early stages, commodity-specific price cycles, of course, don't help. There's country-specific issues that we've heard a little bit about here, but we'll dive into. And then there's the geopolitical influences that we'll also touch upon that are very interesting. So today we will touch on issues concerning capital scarcity, geopolitical, and country-specific risks. So topic one, and I know we've touched upon this a little bit, is the decreasing pools of capital for mining, particularly exploration. And as a backdrop, at least in Canada, since 2006, the Canadian capital markets financing for junior exploration around the globe, and primarily Latin America, where most of our dollars that get raised here go, has dropped by 85% from 2006. So there's obviously a number of reasons for this. The investment bankers that I talk to just say Canada's broken. So, but the bottom line is that there's very little funding available for today's exploration coming out of Canada. Panelists, what are the early stage exploration companies doing to fund exploration in your jurisdiction? Conversely, how are large projects being financed? And we don't all need to answer this because I think this topic may overlap one another, but we'll start from the north, Mexico.
Thanks. As you correctly mentioned, we regarding the question of funding, we are 100% affected with how everything is going here or in the U.S. No, it's a direct implication. I think that the rest it's a local risk that can add up above the local or the Canadian reasons or the U.S. reasons. From what we have seen, and that's on my perspective as a firm, we have seen more than financing or straightforward financing or public markets financing. We have seen streaming transactions. We have seen royalty transactions that is more these additional structures or creative structures to fund projects or transactions. That's what we have seen right now. I have not at least seen or heard about a new IPOs here in Canada or in Mexico as well to fund a major project.
Right. Who else wants to comment on this? María Isabel de Ecuador.
Thank you. Yes, well, in Ecuador, we have an advantage because we are a dollarized economy, so inflation rates are low. We've also seen that what's going on in relation to project financing and other opportunities is that our mining cadastre has been closed for at least 3 or 4 years. the government has announced that the mining cadastre will be open soon. They have signed an agreement with a company that has managed the other mining cadastres, such as Mexico and Peru and Colombia. So let's see how that goes. But in the meantime, we've seen a lot of joint ventures in our country. So big companies are using the figure of joint ventures for one type of involvement in a project. And we've also seen streaming agreements, earning agreements, and also a lot of royalty agreements for the couple of projects that are into exploitation phase. We've seen the major royalty companies being interested in those projects. We've seen the junior companies raising capital with big players like Wheaton Precious Metals. We have Traffic Bureau also financing junior mining companies in Ecuador. And I think we are expecting that to be on a periodic basis, because a lot of more projects are developing. A couple of medium-scale mining projects, the ones that I was commenting on that have a license to explode, will begin construction in a couple of years. So they need to raise more capital. And in Ecuador, we do not have bilateral investment treaties into force. However, the government is presenting an option for investors, which are called investment protection agreements. So in those IPAs, you get protection for foreign investors, you get tax and legal stability, along with international arbitration as an option to resolve controversy. So that's what we've seen in Ecuador so far.
Brazil?
I think it's more of the same that Fernando said. Okay. Streaming, royalties, private placements. And as I mentioned, we have the hope to have this incentivized bonds to come up and play a role with the economy too.
What we're seeing in Peru, I guess, it's a generalization, of course, but for the sake of giving a straight answer, yes, major mining companies are very active exploring now. Brownfield projects, when compared to greenfield projects in the past, percentage-wise, they are more significant now. It's very hard for junior companies to raise money. I can remember how many junior companies we had 10 years ago. Now I could actually give you the list of how many of they are active. So it's a shift. It's different. One of the things that everyone says around is we have to promote for juniors to come around here, sure, but they need the funding, and the funding doesn't, you don't find it in Peru, at least. You have to go Canada, those kind of markets, and we're dry here as well. Mm-hmm. So I kind of see that this is the time for majors stepping in, focusing on exploration and taking advantage of the projects of the few junior companies that are able to move them forward.
Yeah, I would say that in Chile it's about the same. What we have seen and we have been working is in a lot of royalty agreements, streaming agreement, very large streaming agreement, by the way. And the other thing we have seen are the large mining companies making investment in the junior mining companies and their assets. And the large mining companies that have operation in Chile, they have a lot of cash now, and they are buying properties that are nearby their properties or their mines. They are doing a lot of joint venture with the junior mining companies. And the junior mining companies, as somebody said already, is very difficult today to raise money for them. And the way that we have seen that they're raising money is in the stock market, which is quite difficult. But they have been getting funds from the large mining company when this company have advanced mining projects.
Well, I have something different to say. There are newcomers in Argentina. It's not only local companies that never been involved in mining, but suddenly they realize that they can do some money on these early stage projects, and probably to raise 10, 15, 20 millions, they can afford to do that. And the largest oil and gas companies are stepping into mining a lot. And also we have to name the Chinese companies. There are a large number of Chinese companies coming to Argentina. They have their own financing. They don't need to raise capital on the markets. And they are doing a number of joint venture agreements with the local mining companies from different parts, no restrictions on that sense. So they are one of the sources of financing most important that we are receiving in Argentina. And this is something interesting to consider because sometimes these companies may suffer some restrictions in other jurisdictions. But in Argentina, we are a country that probably the credit rating of the country will take a number of years until we reach any investment grade, probably a long time. We have inflation, we have capital controls. Some foreign companies consider that the rule of law is still not on the benchmark they would like to, they are ready to invest. But the Chinese companies, they don't pay attention to that. So these are companies that are welcome, they are doing a lot of business, and there is something to be considered.
Yeah. So turning to the second heading of longer-term risk, political interference. We've talked a little bit about that, but political interference, in my mind, are risks that manifest in several ways, including particularly during political campaigns, when politicians from the left or the right can become pro or anti-mining, depending on how they see the mood of the voters. A related issue is the geopolitical tensions between the West and China that is manifesting in Latin America most acutely in the critical mineral space, which you've just touched upon, but we'll talk about that. So the question for the panelists is, please expand on the geopolitical issues as well as local political risks as you see them and how they impact mining. Why don't we start with Argentina?
Well, there are interesting developments. In regard with critical minerals, there are a large set of new legislation coming from what we could call the central governments. The United States have the Inflation Reduction Act. Europe has the Critical Mineral Reduction Act, the Critical Raw Material Act. Canada, Australia, and the UK has the Critical Mineral Strategy. Most of them are trying to secure the supply, to diversify the supply. They're trying to promote exploring activity on their own countries. Of course, Australia is one of the major producers, the same the States, Canada as well. And they are trying to secure sustainability on all the value added on all the steps of the chain of production, environmental, social, human rights. I would have to say that we share those goals in our countries. We share those goals, but our goals are not there. And our countries always are requiring to add value to the investment. This is not the case like Indonesia, where Indonesia at the early stage on nickel development, they banned completely all the exports of nickel until there were smelting producing over there, and they were successful to do that. But sometimes when our countries try to introduce some kind of tax regimes in order to promote smelting, refinery, different value added in the country, we suffer some consideration to say that we have introduced trade barriers to our economy. But an incentive coming from the Inflation Reduction Act is not considered a trade barrier. So this is a discussion that I think we will still have to continue in order to find common grounds.
Thank you, Saúl. Maybe Brazil next. Let's break up the rhythm.
Geopolitically speaking, I'm just going to be brief. In Peru comes to mind the Chinese. Chinese, they own two of the largest copper mines. Perhaps they're not the largest investors in mining. They're in the podium, definitely. But now they're going to have one of the largest ports in South America. They're building one just 100 kilometers north of Lima. And it's apparently so important for them that their president is going to this lovely South American country to the inauguration of the port. So for them, this seems to be, and Chinese don't do things without thinking hard on the long-lasting consequences. So that's a reality. And the reality as well is that the Americans are perhaps a little bit upset with that. So that might open a window of opportunity. And that's something that I heard today in the Peru Days presentations by the governor of the Peruvian Central Bank, which he conveyed the idea that this was a good opportunity because the focus of the Chinese will cause the focus of other world players in the country, which is good. If you want to come, you're all welcome. Peru is a very welcoming country.
Thank you so much. And I think it's kind of similar in Brazil from what you said. We also have no restrictions for foreign investments. We have a restriction on border zones, but only that. And Chinese are also welcome. And we had a troubled government before this one with respect to this type of investments, but now we kind of welcome everybody to come. So you are all invited. And we have gold, as you see. Right?
Yeah. Carlos?
I think Chile is about the same. Chile has a very open economy and we receive investment from all over the world. We don't have any restriction at all in relation with the country that wants to invest in Chile. As I said before, Chile is the largest producer of copper and China is the largest buyer of our minerals. On the other hand, China has been participating in all the mining tender process in Chile without being success, as opposed in Peru. But they have been very successful in other industries, such as power, infrastructure, and in the wine business. But in mining, they haven't been success so far.
Is there a reason for that, Carlos?
No, it's just the offer. Just the offer. They have arrived in several times in the second position, but just the offer.
Okay. Yeah. Mariana, Colombia?
Thank you, Paul. Well, as I was saying in my previous intervention, in my previous comment, the state's announcements are making it difficult to achieve mining development in Colombia. And I have also to say that obtaining permits and environmental licenses is quite difficult in Colombia. But at this point, I want to underscore that checks and balances do work in Colombia. And we trust, and the mining industry trusts, that every single decision made by the executive branch will be duly reviewed by the high courts. And that's very important. And to give you a recent example, the Constitutional Court struck down a provision that was included in the 2023 tax reform that established that royalties derived from the production of natural resources could not be deducted from the income tax, nor could be treated as a cost or expense. And this decision was based on strong legal arguments, even though this decision is costing the government almost 30% of the projected tax revenue for 2024. So this is very important in Colombia. I would like to repeat that checks and balances in Colombia works and have worked and will continue be working.
María Isabel, Ecuador.
What's happening in Colombia? We haven't received any constitutional court resolution about royalties yet in Ecuador. However, the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, is still reviewing on that about if royalties could be deducted from the income tax. So that will be a good discussion for next year, maybe. But it's curious to say that we have the same problem in Ecuador. In relation to political risk, I would have to mention that our president is very young, so I mentioned that before, and the majority of voters in the country are between 16 and 25 years old. So the president wants to get support from the young people and that means being responsible in his speech about that he's very compromised with the energy transition, and he's also a very strong supporter of that environment is very important. So he wants to continue having this message for the youth in the country, considering that he needs support from them for the next election in June 2025. However, he has a good contrast because he's giving also a message that if things are doing right, especially in extractive industries, the government is going to support the projects. So that's a good balance in relation to what's going on between gaining votes from the youth and gaining credibility from foreign investors. So that's a good thing to mention. And besides that, we have a very important political actor in the country, which is our Constitutional Court. They have been issuing important resolutions in relation to extractive industry projects. And we've been getting several projects being jeopardized by the Constitutional Court resolutions. But fortunately, we've seen that the support of the government is beginning to change that environment. So as I was mentioning, these couple of months, the government's been in office only for 100 days. And we've seen a very huge turnout in relation to the political environment in the country.
Great. Thank you. And Fernando, Mexico, I know you've talked about this a little bit.
No, just regarding the involvement of Chinese in Mexico, we have seen it more in the iron ore industry in Mexico. We have a huge discussion right now, and you were talking about checks and balances. In Mexico, we have our own check and balance with the US on a daily basis. And they are trying to impose tariffs right now due to the involvement of an anti-dumping scenario with iron ore involved with Mexican iron ore produced. So that's where we see the Chinese involvement, a bit of investment definitely in precious minerals, and we saw a bit of a conflict right now with a lithium project, or the most advanced lithium project on the north of the country, and that after the nationalization it got cancelled. That is Jianseng, or this huge Chinese mining company, and they're fighting in courts due to a technicality in which the government either due that they had grandfathering rules, even though that the project got cancelled because of a technicality. No, so we definitely are seeing there besides what we're going to discuss in the other risks.
Thank you. Topic 3, another issue and risk is regulatory risk, which I think is a little different than political risk. Regulatory risk comes in all shapes and sizes, from changes to ownership rights, increases to royalties and taxes, toughening of environmental license requirements and social license applications, to government red tape and bribes. Panelists, please highlight the examples of the regulatory issues that cause instability in your jurisdiction. And maybe we'll start with Brazil to, again, break up the line.
Sure. So from a regulatory perspective, I think we have kind of stability in terms of ownership. What we can see now is we have the government taking a look or a closer look to those titles that have not been explored from a long time. So you have the mining companies owning the titles for a long time, but without actually doing something. And this was something that is a trend in the market. You have all the players doing the same, holding those titles, but not actually doing something with them. And we can see now a trend that the government is taking a better look at that and trying to push for the projects to have actually a development in a faster way. We had also, by the end of last year, a new rule related to affected communities affected by the tailing dams. Of course, you know the origin of this new regulation. The government had to have a response to what happened with the accidents. So there is still a lot of uncertainty in terms of what will be these actual remedies for the communities that have been affected. The rule has been enacted on December last year, but we are still waiting for this to be actually detailed on what will be the measures and remedies for these affected communities, what we call affected communities, what type of compensation that we should pay to these communities depending on how they are actually affected. If in one hand it creates a little bit of tension on the costs that may be increased, on the other hand, as soon as we have it actually ruled deeply in details, maybe it's gonna also add some certainty on the process. So there is a flip side to that may be positive to the sector itself. I think that's it.
Mariana, Colombia.
Thank you, Paul. Well, to continue with my previous point, this government is very active, trying to determine the new legal framework for mining in Colombia. And is adopting, well, 2 months ago, a new decree was enacted regarding temporary natural reserves that, well, temporary natural reserves exist in Colombia since 2013. And some of them were demarcated at that moment. But with this decree, he's increasing the restrictions of activities to be done within these areas. And also, the government has just made public a new bill that would modify the current code of mining code. And I don't know if you know, but our mining code has long been considered a pro-investor regulation. So yes, it is. The current government seems to have so many problems with the current regulation, and again, behind the veil of environmental protection is enacting and stating things, but as I said before, this active attitude from the government paradoxically give us an opportunity to discuss the future of mining in Colombia. And I think that the Mining Association, is taking advantage of this situation, and hopefully we, after several discussions, at least principles could be established from the society in Colombia vis-a-vis the hard position that the current government is having about mining in Colombia.
Fernando, Mexico.
Yeah, thanks. Regarding regulatory risks, well, we have a new mining law in place since May of last year, and it was a game-changer law. It was not a minimum amendment. It changed the way of how the concessions are granted, the reasons to grant a concession, the economic compensation to be paid to the government, which we didn't have before. It conditions the granting of mining concessions to the availability of water, with a very subjective way on determining where's water available. The term of the concessions have been reduced, and the automatic extension of the period in which the concessions were granted was changed to a conditioning scenario, which obviously reduces these feasibility studies. Financing perspectives are reduced. It is the new mining law was enacted in May of last year, and it granted a 180 days period to issue the new rulings of the mining law. As of today, those 180 days have been elapsed, and we still do not have new rulings. So we're living right now with a new mining law and with the former rulings. So it is what I have been calling as an interim period, in which mining companies, advisors, government were trying to guess what should apply. On the judicial side, there's thousands of amparos, which whoever doesn't know, it's a constitutional lawsuit filed against a human right violation on Mexican courts. And there's an unconstitutionality action filed by the opposition party of the administration. That needs to be resolved by the Supreme Court. It was filed close to the enactment of the law, and perhaps we will see a couple of months more for it to be resolved at the Supreme Court. We are confident that the Supreme Court, at least as how the Supreme Court is structured today, and at least on the actual rules of the Supreme Court, because there's another amendment filed by the president to change the judicial system. But if we don't consider that amendment to be successful, we are confident on the mining sector that the Supreme Court will repeal the new law, at least as with the status quo. If that happens, we will go back to the former law, which was a pro-investment law as well, as Mariana mentioned. And however, we have elections in June. And those elections, the key part would be, I will get into the political risk or later on, but the key part would be that the candidate of the actual president doesn't win with 2/3 of the majority of the Congress. That's what everyone is hoping for. And then it would be a similar scenario to what we're seeing right now, in which no major constitutional changes will happen without these 2/3 of the majority. But that's the news that we have.
Thank you. Oscar, Peru.
Thanks. I'm the optimist. I don't think that there's much of a regulatory risk in Peru anymore. I might be completely wrong, of course. Wouldn't be the first time, but I strongly think that there's a consensus in the country that we've gone too far. We have seems that lawyers did this, so the only getting the work are lawyers, but not the industry. It's too much. And we believe, and the consensus is, that the pendulum has to begin going now the other way. That, of course, takes time and doesn't mean that the red tape will cease to exist or become pink or whatever, but we're in that process. In that, I'm optimist. I think that if something happens, it will be for the better.
Great. Ecuador.
And also with prior indigenous consultation. So this uncertainty in this couple of regulations has brought constitutional claims before our ordinary judges and then constitutional court. However, after a resolution by this court, now the National Assembly and the government, they are obliged to enact a law for environmental consultation and also indigenous prior consultation. Actually, the ombudsman, which in Spanish is Defensoría del Pueblo, it's a different figure that the ombudsman in Canada or the States, they have already submitted a bill of law in relation to environmental consultation. However, during this term for the National Assembly to approve this bill of law, there's an executive decree into force which allow mining companies, this couple of projects, to obtain an environmental license. So that's a good sign because even the Constitutional Court understood the necessity of having some regulatory framework into force for the companies to be able to avoid this uncertainty, this regulatory uncertainty in environmental consultation. As per indigenous prior consultation, which is a big issue in Ecuador, the law is going to be soon enacted. And the major problem in the country is that we haven't had a prior indigenous consultation law so far. So as you can imagine, NGOs, environmentalist organizations, extreme activists are using this regulatory framework uncertainty to bring out constitutional claims that jeopardize mining and extractive industry projects. Also, in general terms, the president has been really active in in terms of legislation. He's been presenting and passing 4 urgent economic bills of law during these 100 of days into office. And also the National Assembly is, the president is getting a lot of methods and good strategies to gain more governance and governability. So the National Assembly, since they began office at the end of 2023, they have passed more than 10 bill of laws in relation to labor, and tax issues in the country. So it's been the government and the National Assembly has been very active in this regard.
Great. Any other jurisdictions that wish to comment?
I would say that the main issue that we have today is the excess of permits that we need in order to develop a mining property and a mining project, and the excess of permit and the timing required in order to get all those permits. Just for your knowledge, for the developing of a large mining project, we need about 4,000 permits, and the term required to get all those permits about 8 years. Another big issue today is the local community opposition and the lack of water that we have in the north of Chile, where most of the mines are. As you know, in the north of Chile, we have the desert. We have a lot of very little water, and today it's becoming mandatory for the mining companies to bring the water from the ocean and pump it to the mines, that in some cases they are located at 4,000 meters high. So the cost of that is extremely high. And the only one that can do that are the large mining companies. So the medium-sized company and the junior mining company, they have a good project. It's impossible for them to bring the water from the ocean up to the mines when they are at that altitude.
Well, I think I have to talk about Mr. Millet. We call this section Understanding Mr. Millet. Well, I have to say that he's a libertarian. We are learning how a libertarian behave, and he is delivering what he promised. This is true. The people was thinking that it will be the other way, because when he was on the political campaign, he was saying, if I win, this will be tough. The time will be kind of suffering for everyone. I will reduce the size of the government, of the state. I will cut all the expenditures from the government. I will try to stabilize prices, and the market will regulate the prices. And he's doing that. The people say, hey, come on, you are a politician, you were supposed to say a thing and do something different. But he's not. He's not. He considers that the private activity is the one that will add value, will create value to the economy, not the government. So he has cut a large number of the expenditures from the government. Imagine in Argentina, probably 40% of the expenditures are from the government. Infrastructure, pension funds that are paid, the retirement by the government, a large number. And the provinces that they receive funds from the government, all this has been reduced or cut. Something like 5 points of the IGP has been cut only in January. And he's trying to remove controls, to change regulations, to private property is a paramount right to be protected. He sent 2 pieces of legislation. One has 300 sections, and the other had more than 500 sections. Imagine the work as lawyers we have trying to analyze, explain to our clients what it's all about, because it changed everything. Now, of course, he's in a battle with the Congress in order to see how much of these rules will be approved. But from the point of view of the private activity, the mining, everything, they are trying to free the country, remove obstacles, remove controls. It will take a time, but this is the right direction. However, even though we may share those arguments, the question here is sustainability. Whether all these changes will be caught by the people, because it will be, everyone will be poorer in this transition time. Have to wait and see.
You're poorer in the short term, but the long-term gains.
Hope so.
Yeah. Okay, looking at topic 4, security. Security is a complex issue given the degradation over the past decade of law and order in various Latin American jurisdictions. Security concerns can arise from local organized crime, illegal miners, union, police corruption, etc. Please expand on the risks and mitigating strategies in the context of your country. And why don't we start with Colombia? Or not.
Nothing to say.
Well, as you all know, sadly, security concerns in my country have always been present. And as you know, we have the longest internal armed conflict in the world. So yes, what I have to say is this is a big challenge for Colombians, for the current government, for the past governments, for the future governments, and especially for all the Colombians. I think that this problem is worsened because the illegal mining is intertwined with other criminal actions, such as all this drug problem that we have. So yes, to sum up, this is still a problem in Colombia, and this is one of the most difficult challenges that we have to face daily, this industry and other industries in Colombia.
Yeah, Mexico.
You're following the ranking on the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, Mexico has a huge challenge ahead of him regarding security issues with local cartels. Strictly without getting into more the political, which is the cause of most of it, or at least the complication that we're living as of today. It's mining activities. This is daily facing this as a challenge. The actual politic that the president has taken regarding organized crime is the translation would be hogs, not bullets. That's exactly what he's saying to the media, and it's saying that we should all hog instead of fighting against organized crime. The response of what we've seen of the organized crime as a reaction to that is the strengthening of its whole scheme, of its whole organization. They are more present in all levels of a Mexican society, economic, political, and educational, election-wise. We seen them. We can see them. We can feel them, or at least their presence in all these stages. Strictly on mining. They are specifically because of the geographic locations of the mining projects. Well, of course, they are close to these places where they have their own business, and we have seen a couple of two different reactions between public companies and the limitations they have because of their own regulations, FATCA, CPA, etc., and local mining groups, Mexican groups, non-public, publicly traded, I'm referring. I think that what they're looking for is the organized crime, what they're looking for is to be present and to earn out or participate in the earnings of a mining project against peace or against access to certain region. Publicly traded companies, of course, they're not, and the private, don't get me wrong, the private as well, they're not allowed to do that, but at least they have some leverage. No, that's what we have seen. We have definitely seen mining projects that have been stopped, suspended, or canceled because of the presence of organized crime. The organized crime take the mine and even they try to continue to operate them. They have become miners as well in some way. and they own the whole chain, the supply chain, or they try to participate in the whole supply chain, in transportation, in the unions, I don't know if they're going to get into finance sometime, no, or in some more evolved area. But yeah, their presence and the actual scenario of Mexico or Mexican government is not helping to prevent that.
Wow. So the idea is to try and hug the criminals that
Yeah.
are taking advantage of
Exactly.
societies and have them hug you back. Is that the idea?
He says that there is no reason to kill each other, no, or to fight against them because, well, they come from poor towns, and that they need to be heard, and that sometimes the bad guys are not the ones that are holding the gun, but are the bosses, and that so we should all talk it out and work each other and work with each other and help us in that. And that's his politics, and it can be, and you can see it with the actual day-to-day fighting against this. There has not been major stoppage of these drug lords or these cargo what you have heard in previous administration in this year. We have right now, again, as I mentioned before in my previous intervention on checks and balances, we have a lot of pressure from the U.S. right now, and this is a major topic on the election that it's upcoming. This fentanyl crisis in the U.S. and as well, I think with you guys here in Canada, it is all being blamed to Mexico and the cartels, and it is passing through there. So we might see there something from the pressure from the U.S. towards Mexico that will need to change the strategy.
We've been hearing a lot about Ecuador as well, with gang activity and them taking over radio or TV stations.
Sadly, we were on the news at the beginning. And of course, Ecuador has always been a drug transit country. But we are now, at the beginning of the year, the country began feeling the influence of Mexican cartels in the country. But fortunately, the president took immediate action in relation to security in the country. So he gave more power and more faculties to the armed forces and also to the police. For the first time from what I recall, this is the first time in the country that the police and the armed forces have credibility by the people. The people are trusting the armed forces and the police. The president changed all the head of the public forces, and he mentioned this today in the Ecuador Day, which was a good thing to do. He also began a plan to fight against criminal organizations. And in line with that, he did a powerful intervention in the prisons in Ecuador. So you've seen some videos like in El Salvador. Ecuador is doing almost the same with prisons. They're taking all the benefits inside the prisons to the criminal organization leaders, which has been a very strong message for other countries and for especially for the people in Ecuador. And also our prosecutor general, who is a woman, it's beginning very strong investigations in relation to organized crimes, in relation to politics in the country. So a lot of these have been analyzed by the prosecutor general, and they are of course prosecuting former political leaders, organized crime leaders, and the country is feeling this state of safe, that we feel safe now. After this powerful intervention, there's a perception that security, it's been increasing in Ecuador, and this is a good thing to do, because I believe that the president didn't leave things going further, so he took immediate actions, and he's getting more than 80% support of the people. So
Nice.
This is a good thing to say for the country.
And any hugs from the government? No hugs?
I think our president does not want to hug the
hugs.
criminals. That's
No
a good
hugs.
thing to say.
Okay. Argentina?
No, I have to say that we are fortunate to say that there is no security issue. There's no, danger affecting the activity, mining oil or gas, or the general safety. We are fine with that.
And Chile has seen a rise in in criminality and drugs. Has that affected mining?
Yeah, I would say that we are having security issues, mainly crime, illegal immigrations, but they are not affecting the mining operation because, as I said, they are all located, or most of them are located in the north of Chile, where is our desert. And in those places do not live too many people, and the security issues that we're talking about, they happen in the big cities. So, for example, in Santiago, which is the capital of Chile, where we live 8 million people, we are having problems for securities. But for the mining operation, we don't have any problem at all.
Anybody else wish to comment?
I
Something there?
think I can say that in Brazil, you do have the illegal mining and you do have organized crime, but they are not together yet. So this is a good news, right? We know that they are very creative people and they might be together at some point, but for now, we don't have issues in mining considering security.
So we've got about 8 minutes left. We want to leave a bit of time for questions. So we'll run through the last topic, and we touched upon this a little bit, local community, opposition to projects. And why don't we start with Oscar in Peru?
Sure. I wouldn't say that there's a overall answer for Peru in terms of how communities react for mining. They actually react very differently depending on where you are in the country. The way in which communities approach mining operations is very different. It has to do a lot with two things. First, of course, how the mining company behaves, how they do things, how they interact from the very beginning. That's really important. But second, this is true, there are certain political agendas in certain pockets of the country which arouse certain communities and things can get complicated. But experience has shown that good community work allows you to work. Right. And that is something that has been done quite a lot. And something that I should say that has to do with the previous topic is that something that is having an impact is illegal mining. Illegal mining is, we used to be, I know, unfortunately, the number 2 producers of cocaine in the world. Well, now illegal mining is, as a business, if I may use the expression, doubles or triples drug dealing in Peru. So the impact of illegal mining is now very big. And that impact is now, somehow, you're seeing it in medium-sized operations. Some communities are getting involved in illegal mining because it's a very good business for them. So that interaction is being there, can have an impact. And the government, they say that they have an understanding of what is happening and that is a big problem, but only time will tell if this is tackled. But we're seeing their interaction with criminal bands, Ecuadorian, Colombians, Venezuelans, Mexicans. The thing is beginning to heat up. We're not yet where unfortunately some of you guys have mentioned you are, but it's something that has to be seen very carefully.
Colombia?
Well, I think I have very positive news to comment on this. And I have taken a survey conducted in May 2023 about the relationship with the communities that live in the project's area of influence and about the opinion of citizens in Colombia. And, well, first of all, I have to say that the mining industry generates more than 160,000 direct jobs in Colombia and 700,000 of indirect jobs in my country. So, well, the people is aware of that. And according to the survey that was, as I told you, conducted in May 2023, 77% of the surveyed population from non-mining municipalities consider that well-done mining brings development to the regions where the mines are operating. And this percentage increases to 82% in mining municipalities where they are the main source of income. 53% of the population consider that the country's economy would worsen if mining companies stopped operating. In mining municipalities, this number increases to 57%, and only 25% of the people from non-mining municipalities agree with banning mining in their municipality. So, again, I think that these are good news. I think that the industry is developing and conducting a serious work regarding social matters and communities in their places and the regions. So yes, I think that these are good news.
Great, thank you. Maybe we can hear from Ecuador next.
Yeah, in contrast to other countries of the region, the lack of knowledge about the mining industry in the country, it's a big challenge. So the government and mining companies are beginning working together to educate people about mining, about that responsible mining could be done, and how this big impacts that extractive industries. You think that mining is bad because you've seen some bad things around the globe, but you need to understand that as long as you're complying with the law, as long as you're investing in the people, investing in the environment protection, mining can be done well, and mining could bring progress to the country. There's a lot of mining opposition within some communities, especially in the southern northern part of the country. And I was referring to this constitutional actions that has been brought before ordinary judges and the Constitutional Court. And that is because recently, the government is still trying to present a better way for the communities and the people to understand how the benefit of mining and other extractive industries is going to be taken to the communities, because mostly the people hear that for a mining investment you're gonna need more than $1,000 to $2,000 million, and the communities there, they just ask, but how am I receiving at least a little bit of that money that the companies are investing? So now, Ecuador is on the process of implementing the EITI standards, the Extractive Industries Transparency Standards. So that will force the government to transparent the benefits included in the mining exploitation agreements, and also including regulation that it's clear about how the benefits are going to be given to the community on a direct basis.
Great. So we've gotten to the end of the session. Why don't we just take one or two quick questions, and if there's any other questions, we can take them up in the social piece of this.
Very much. I think, in my mind, the most interesting development in the region has been in a country not represented by this distinguished panel, which is Panama. I'd like anyone's opinion as to whether the Cobre de Panama saga might happen in your jurisdictions.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, that's the prime example of political risk. And yeah, I don't know what else to say to that. That's, yeah.
You know, in our country sometimes, I'm going to take it from here, but political risk is equal to country risk for most of it, right? So these kind of things can happen, elections, are there, and sometimes we vote not thinking very well of what we're doing, and it's something common in most of our countries. So I don't see it happening in Peru. Perhaps I don't see that happening in any other country now, but it's definitely not a good example. And I do know that some anti-groups in my country, at least, have taken note with 14 font, and they are taking a good note of that as something that could be done if they have the room to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good segue to ending this. It kind of ties into the title, why it's so hard to crack the rock, and mining's not for the faint of heart. I only like the exploration phase, frankly. Drill some holes and get the hell out of Dodge, but that's just me. With that, let's just wrap it up, and thank you very much to the panelists. It's been amazing, super informative as always, and Thank you for attending.